Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you, which if you're new here is a video I film every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and for anyone who's very familiar with the series, welcome back. Today I am going to be talking about the books that I read from the 21st until the 26th of March. I read a total of 4 things. One was part of a vlog, so I'm not going to talk about that in too much detail because I've already talked about that in the vlog. I read one tome, so one book over 500 pages, and 3 novels. All of the novels, I think the shortest one was 366 pages, so there was a lot of pages. I think it actually turned out even at about 2,000 pages, which it's never that neat, ever. And my yearly reading total is 106 books. If you haven't seen my most recent vlog, I will leave it linked up on the screen. For that, the extra book that I read that I don't think I talked about in last week's Books Beside My Bed video was Full Moon Rising by Kerry Arthur, which is an Australian paranormal romance / urban fantasy start to a series where the main character, Riley Jensen, is half vampire, half werewolf, and she gets drawn into this supernatural investigation. And it was a lot of fun. You can sort of tell that it was an early Kerry Arthur book, just in terms of the writing style, but it was very enjoyable and fun. And it was set in Melbourne, which I always love books that are set in my hometown. I did end up giving that one 3.5 out of 5 stars, but if you want to hear all of my thoughts, go check out the vlog. And then we come to the 3 books that I read during the week. And because they were relatively long books, it was spaced out during the week. Also, March has been a month. I think we can all just agree with that. And so some nights I just couldn't even stomach the thought of picking up a book. But I did get through these ones, which makes me pretty happy. I read this. I know that I said I wasn't going to be reading it for a while, but I did pick it up. And there was a very particular reason why I read this book. But A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas is book 4 in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. It is the first book in sort of the spin-off subset of the series where we've switched from Feyre and Rhysand's story into Nestor and Cassian's story. It is a 2021 release. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm firmly on the fence about this book, so I'll explain a little bit about it, then I'll say what I liked and possibly what bothered me about the book. So in this story we follow Nestor. So Nestor is Feyre's oldest sister, and throughout the first 3 books she's a very, I don't really want to say morally grey character, but she's a very prickly character. And she resents Feyre quite a lot. She resents her father and her family a lot for everything that has happened to them. And then she is, oh, and I should say there's going to be spoilers, so skip this part if you don't want to hear it. And she is made into a high fae as a result of what Feyre and Rhysand are doing. So she's very resentful of them. And so by the time we get to this book, she is in a very dark spiral of self-loathing, and she's drinking and sleeping with strangers, and she's just spending money that's not hers, and she doesn't care. It's all rooted in this very deep-seated trauma that she has, and she's very reluctant to move on from it and to get help. So that's where she starts. And I was recently listening to a Fated Mates episode on morality chain books, and Sarah McLean actually said in a lot of ways Nestor is demonstrating some of those morality chain things in this book, because she's not quite the villain, but she's also not necessarily a good character. And it's only through her developing her relationship with Cassian that she begins to see that things can be different. But it still doesn't change the core of her character. She's still quite a prickly, very forthright, very strong female character. Doesn't necessarily mean I like her, but I enjoyed her a lot more in this story than I thought I was going to. So anyway, her behaviour is called out by Feyre and Rhysand, and they basically exile to the House of Wind, which is one of their properties that is virtually unreachable because it's up a ridiculous amount of stairs on a hill, and the only way that people can get in there is if they can fly or if they can winnow, which is sort of like a teleportation skill that some of the characters have. So they drop her off at the House of Wind, and the only way she can get out is if she can travel this staircase, and it's rough, and it becomes very symbolic of her journey, her ability to try and attempt and fail and eventually make it up and down the stairs. And then there's a big story plot, and to be honest, I can't remember the details of that plot, which probably tells you why this book is a 3.5 out of 5 star book. There were things that I did really enjoy about this. I enjoyed Nestor's journey. I think that Sarah J Maas does really well is she explores the idea of trauma and how a woman can get herself out of that deep deep-seated spiral of trauma-related behaviours without necessarily needing a man to do it. Because while Cassian helps her on her journey, he's not the one to save her. She saves herself by beginning to realise what she could be, which I appreciate. I also liked how Cassian doesn't give up on her. He is probably her only ally for the majority of the book, because everyone else is really frustrated with her behaviours. There's a couple of characters who are a bit more removed from the situation, but he doesn't give up on her. And I like that she also begins to develop strong female friendships, because she clearly doesn't have those. The people that she connects with, and there's a really cool set of circumstances that brings them together and forges this really strong bond between the three of them, because there's 3 friends. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I also enjoyed all of the training scenes and sequences, because you have Cassian and Azriel training a group of women who are determined to learn how to fight and defend and protect themselves for a purpose bigger than themselves. And Cassie and Azriel don't talk down to them, they don't diminish what they're trying to do, and they never diminish the reasons why they're doing it. And that was really, really heartening to see in the book. I also really liked the House of Wind, which turns out to be sentient and forges a strong connection with Nesta. So those are the things that I really, really loved. The things that bothered me, the pacing in this book is way off. You go 200 pages with nothing happening, then you get major sequence, and then 150 pages with nothing happening, and then major sequence, and then 200 pages of nothing happening. I like tighter writing. And if you're going to get me to read a fantasy book, I need the writing to be tighter. I know there's a lot of world building, but you also don't need a lot of world building in book 4 of a series, because we're not in a new part of the world. I found that really frustrating. I kept getting stuck and I kept getting drawn out of the story because I just wanted to get to the next thing that was going to be interesting to read. I also really struggled with Feyre and Rhys in this book, and their subplot, which I know had to happen, just felt overly melodramatic and beside the point. Their plot was a convenient way to keep them out of the majority of the story without making them the focus, and yet it still dragged them back into the center of the story when really this should have been Nesta's story. So that part of the story I was less interested in. I would have actually preferred more scenes with the sisters. I think that would have been far more beneficial and far more engaging for me to read rather than what was going on. The other thing that bothered me was how she wrote Azriel, because I love him as a character. I think he's a very intriguing character, and I'm very curious to see if he ever gets his book. But if she writes him the way that she wrote him in this book, I do not want to read it, because he was very one-dimensional on the page, and it bothered me a lot. It actually, every time I got to it, I'm like, hang on, what? So that frustrated me, because I do really like him as a character. And also, Nesta has a very unique brand of magic that she's stolen that comes to a head in this book, and it's fantastic. I loved her magic. And then they got rid of it, because why could they have a really strong, powerful, prickly woman with that much power? This ties back into Feyre and Rhys's story, which is probably also why I'm annoyed, because I would have loved to have seen how Nesta with this extreme power continued through the series. Anyway, I've talked a lot about this book, so I'm putting it down and we're going to move on. The next book that I read was Kiss of Snow by Nalini Singh. This is book 10 in the Psy-Changeling series. If I wasn't fully obsessed with Judd in this series, this would be my favorite book, because it is just so delightful to read. This is the slowest of slowest burns in the series, because we meet these characters in book 1 and it takes all the way through to book 10 for them to get their story. Obviously this is a 5-star read for me. This book is about Hawke, who is the alpha of the Snow Dancer pack, and Sienna Lauren, who is one of the Psy who defected from the Psy-Net and joined his pack with her family. She is the niece of Walker and Judd. She is Toby's sister and Marley's cousin. She's a very strong cardinal Psy with a martial ability that has the potential to kill her within the first 25 years of her life. And in this book, I think she is 19 or 20 years old. Hawke is, I think, in his early 30s, so there's a significant age gap between the two of them. It is a fated mates story, slow burn romance, and it is just so wonderful to see this power dynamic between the two of them, because despite her age, Sienna is a very, very powerful woman. She doesn't fit as neatly into the pack hierarchy. She's a novice soldier because she is in her late teens, early 20s. She's still in her training, but with her own people, the Psy, she would be considered at the top of the ranking system, and which makes her a perfect character to go up against Hawke. And Hawke himself is dealing with a lot of issues, including the fact that he is trying to keep his distance from her because he knows that she is interested in him. But as a child, he believes he met his fated mate and she died. His mate was 5 years old when she died in an avalanche. And so he's holding on to all of this and he's very reluctant to get involved in any long-term relationship, which is what Sienna wants. So the push and pull between these two is just fantastic. And I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm going to have a full video on Kiss of Snow. The other really cool thing about this book is you also get a subplot romance, which is the one between Walker, Lauren, so Sienna's uncle, and Lara, who is the snow dancer medic. It's the first time we have two discrete love stories in the same book. Walker and Lara's relationship isn't developed as much, but you do get it thrown into certain parts of the story, so they're almost paralleling one another, which is really cool. I love this book. I love this series. Just go read it. And then for my Read Digital challenge to read the book that was oldest on my TBR, I read Forged in Ash by Trish McCallan, which is Red Hot Seal's book number 2. This is a paranormal romance story with military aspects in it, and we follow Koski, who is a member of SEAL Team 7, and he was involved in the events that took place in book 1, which I read like 3 or 4 years ago, so trying to, I couldn't remember the story, but you do get enough hints that I was able to piece together what had happened. His team was involved in stopping a plane hijacking in the first book, and he was injured, and he basically blew out his knee. And at the start of this book, he is concerned that his knee is not healing and that he'll never actually get back to being a SEAL because his knee's too injured. One of his teammates suggests that he visit his sister, and Kate has the ability to potentially help heal life-threatening injuries. So Koski reluctantly goes to see her, and the two have this very strong sexual connection, and they are not happy with it, and Koski is a bit of a dick and doesn't really deal with the situation very well. So Kate starts the healing, and then they end up having sex, and he says something very stupid and gets kicked out. Then he is attacked by this mysterious woman who thinks that he has murdered her children. And the whole thing is this suspense military plot with lots of things happening and so on and so forth. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was entertaining enough to read, and I was able to remember enough of the first book to enjoy this one. The one thing I am going to say about this book though is that there is Native American representation. Now, I don't know enough about that culture in order to verify whether any of it is accurate or if it is stereotypical or harmful. So I don't want to comment on that side of it because Kate's ability to heal comes from her heritage, and there are a few other characters who are also Native American in the story. As I said, I don't know enough about that culture to know whether this is a good representation or a harmful one, so be aware of that going into it. For what it was in terms of a paranormal romance, romantic suspense type story, it was entertaining, and I'm going to leave that there. All right, so those are the books that I have read in the last 7 days. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on reading them. Or alternatively, feel free to let me know what you have been reading in the last 7 days. If you're here and you just want to leave an emoji to let me know that you're here, feel free to leave the wolf emoji because Hawke is a wolf alpha. So let's go with the wolf emoji. I hope that wherever you're in the world, you are staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.